We had 2 kids in diapers. He called me at work to say we're both not happy, we should separate. I said I'm not doing this alone, so get over yourself. Tomorrow is my 30th anniversary. People who salvaged their marriage from the brink of divorce, what's your story, and how's it going now? Husband played World of Warcraft. A lot. We had 2 kids. I was miserable and controlling. I went to therapy for myself and got some emotional tools on how to deal with life. It was mind-blowing. I also learned how to not let fear dictate my decisions. Husband noticed. I basically went from controlling and nagging, and a mean sobbing mess to calm, independent and in some ways less caring. He got nervous and agreed to go to therapy. He went for 2 sessions. Basically he got his view of reality called into question. I swear our therapist was like a non-evil Hannibal Lecter. He was good at getting to the heart of things, but both myself and my husband were desperate for change. My husband stepped up, and I stepped down from trying to micromanage his life. Life is good. I caught my wife chatting with someone else online. When I called her on it, she said she knew I was talking to someone else too. We had been emotionally cheating on each other because we felt like we weren't getting what we needed from the marriage. We realized that if we just took the effort that we were spending on the other people and spent it on each other, we'd be happy and getting what we needed. Now our marriage is really amazing. Most of our problems came from his family, full of awful, abusive, intrusive, boundary stomping a-holes. We moved 1,000 miles away and no longer speak to them. We're happy now. Go back 17 years ago, we had a young son. He was my dream child. I lost my focus on my husband and centered entirely on my son. My husband never said much. I was so tired too. All I wanted to do after working 9-10 hours was sleep. He had a job he hated and works 10 hours a day too. We forgot to be in love. Period. I nagged a lot and he just ignored me. I caught him telling our problems to a stranger on the internet. I asked for a divorce. It was around January. I said we would let my son finish the school year and I would leave in June. After that, we coexisted as friends. We had been together for 16 years, so that wasn't hard. Our parents knew we were divorcing and they didn't understand because we were such good friends. Around March we were bored. We wanted to go out to dinner and a movie. I asked my mom to babysit. It was just as friends. I actually took the time to get ready. He did too. We went to dinner and then the movie. By habit, I just grabbed his hand. He never said anything, but just stroked the back of my hand and never let go. We got back into the car. It was late, so we let our son stay overnight. I don't know what happened that night, but I felt something I had never felt before. I was holding on to my best friend and I wasn't going to let go. We went home and just held each other. Divorce was never mentioned again. In my own head I realized that I had to put him first. He needed me too. I balanced my time and he learned to give me the reassurance that I needed to feel loved. As I currently watch him sleep, with a 7-year-old between us, I know that our marriage is about as perfect as a marriage can be. We have both forgiven and accepted each other's faults. My advice to you: number 1. Make one date a month. Make it special. Every 3 to 4 months, plan to go out of town for a night. Act like teenagers. I can't tell you how much I need these nights. We go to concerts, ball games, casinos, or even just camping. Number 2. Don't argue about something that won't matter in 1 month. If he didn't take out the trash, will that really matter? Number 3. Learn to enjoy each other's bodies. I had gained weight and lost all self-esteem. Once I realized that he wasn't looking for perfection, just attention, things changed. I wasn't happy with what I looked like and I have slowly improved. My son is getting married. His soon-to-be wife told him he wanted marriage just like his parents had. That told me everything I needed to know. We had made it. When we married we were virgins. We had saved it for marriage. My wife had pain on our honeymoon due to my above average size. She didn't tell me. She seemed not to enjoy our honeymoon sex. This pain caused my wife to completely reject sex for several months. After 1 year of marriage we had intercourse 11 times. My wife never would talk about our sex life. I tried to figure out what was wrong but she continued to say that everything was good, and she didn't want sex unless she was in the mood. She also wouldn't allow me to do anything to turn her on. We had sex about once a month. This continued for years. We had children, and during the pregnancies we didn't have sex at all. After the pregnancies we seldom had sex. Some years we had sex 3 times. I continued to wait because our children were young. I hoped that when the children were older, our sex life would improve. 10 years into our marriage I decided that something had to change. We had a big talk, and during this talk my wife explained that on our honeymoon sex was painful, and that caused her to not want sex or anything that might lead to sex. No hand holding, no kissing, no cuddling. I was starved for physical affection. I asked if she had any pain or discomfort now when we have sex, and she said no, but she still worried. After this talk frequency bumped up and then went back to once a month. I read everything I could find to try to improve our sex life. Nothing I ever tried worked. My wife complained about being too stressed. I hired a maid. We went on great tropical vacations. I went sexless on the vacations. I took over many chores at home even though I was working a full-time professional job. My wife worked part-time. She worked 16 hours a week. Nothing I tried helped. We went on dates. I sent flowers. I wrote her cards and notes. For many years I tried everything I could find. Eventually our kids were independent and driving. They didn't need us as much. I thought there was hope that our sex life would improve. We continued to vacation and date with no improvement. We went to a marriage counselor with the hope that they could help us. We learned to communicate better. We learned some skills to better talk about sex. After the counselor dismissed us, she told my wife if she couldn't improve our sex life that she should give me an amicable divorce. Soon after the sessions were over, our sex went back to once a month. I was miserable. My love language is physical touch. My wife never touched me and our kisses were quick pecks. I began for the first time considering divorce. We had been married about 2 decades. We had never had a good sex life. Our kids were grown and independent. It was time for a change. I made plans. Financially we were well off and divorce would not be bad for either of us. I would give my wife half of everything in our house. I would move into an apartment close by. I hoped we could still be friends. I still loved her more than anything. My wife saw my distance and asked if I wanted a divorce. We had a long talk and discussed separating. I would move out after Christmas in a month. Several weeks later my wife began initiating sex every night. At first it seemed like duty sex, but within a few weeks the sex became passion-filled. The very frequent sex seemed to raise my wife's libido. She made a 180-degree change. Our recovery happened about 5 years ago. We continue to have frequent sex. We've had sex 5 times since Thursday. Our sex life is alive and vibrant. We had 2 kids and diapers, and we were working opposite schedules so that we could care for them without resorting to daycare. He called me at work to say we're both not happy, we should separate, and, without any emotional tears or anything, I said I'm not effing doing this alone, so get over yourself. Then I hung up the phone. Tomorrow is my 30th anniversary. The kids are grown and successful and we love each other more than we ever have. Long story short, I had a shitty upbringing which led to me being a shitty young adult with no idea about how to be a good partner. For years I never lived up to being even 10% of the wife my husband deserved. After a really bad fight one weekend about 6 years in, he was done. My devastation was all encompassing. I laid in bed for 2 days straight sobbing and wanting to die. He decided that he wanted to continue trying, and when he told me, I fell to my knees sobbing. I don't deserve him, but I am fighting every day to be the best wife I can be. Things have been better in the 1.5 years since. I have sought treatment for my depression and started getting serious about taking responsibility for the things I have done wrong in our marriage, and I plan fun and interesting dates for us at least a few times a month. We have worked on the friendship side of our relationship, and that has been game-changing. So overall I am optimistic, but I still carry a lot of guilt for not treating him the way he deserved for so long. Albeit, marriage was a crap show. We were both still immature in several ways. Things got bad. There was lying, fighting, yelling, verbal and psychological abuse. Divorce was used as a threat, and so was custody of our kids. Husband was having an emotional affair with his ex-wife. We reached a tipping point when, during an argument in which I was told my opinion was wrong, and I needed to change it, or be gone within the week. I left the next day. We fought more. We both filed for divorce. We had one hearing where we talked about custody to the judge. Time passes. My lawyer had everything ready to finalize it, and all it needed was my signature. I opted not to have it filed and not to sign. During the 3 years we were separated, we continued to talk on the phone. I let him see our kids as much as possible. We were hundreds of miles apart, 12 hours driving. My car would not have made the trip. His was in better condition. He may have been a bad husband, but he's always been a good dad. We talked and talked. We both sought therapy individually. We grew up. Eventually he moved back, and I moved back in. We've continued to work on our marriage so we never get to where we were. As for right now, things are okay. We're not perfect people, but we're making it through. I did that cliche movie thing where my husband comes home from work and finds his wife, me, sitting at the kitchen table with a drink gesturing at the other chair like, have a seat. We need to talk. I basically laid out everything that was wrong with our relationship and family life, and there was a lot. I had thought a lot about it all for literal years, married for 9 years at that point, but obviously the communication was so far deteriorated that I hadn't brought any of this up before. He took it very much in stride and said, that's fixable. I'll fix it. I was silent and looked down. He said, unless you don't want it to be fixed. Are you telling me you want a separation? I had wanted a separation, but I couldn't bring myself to tell him that. This conversation was going differently than I expected. I thought he'd jump at the chance to leave me. I thought he hated me. So, I said, well, no, and we talked some more, and made plans to improve our relationship. Several days after that, we were out having dinner and I was too distracted by my thoughts about our shitty marriage to have a good time. He noticed and asked what was wrong. I said, you expect everything to improve overnight. Nothing is better. I feel the same. After a bit of angry back and forth, we got the check and stormed home. We live walking distance from the restaurant we were at, so we angrily power walked home. It must have been comedic to people who were watching. Everything came out that night. All the ways that he had wronged me, as far back as 10 years ago, that he had never apologized for or acknowledged, all the way up to the present. He said, why now? Why are you telling me this now? What has changed? Has longtime friend of mine pitted you against me for some reason? And so the truth came out. I said, I met someone else. It was true. I'd met someone else and it was mainly an emotional affair, though we exchanged pictures and sexted. But what struck me was how differently they both treated me. I mean, long story short, it was like night and day. To put it very simply, the other guy respected my time and made me feel like I had value as a person separate from making him happy, whereas my husband did not make me feel like that. I had not wanted to tell my husband about the affair. The other guy and I were not going to get together, and were in fact starting to end our relationship, so telling my husband would be just pointless and hurtful. I mainly told him in order to clear my poor friend's name. He really thought she was trying to get me to divorce him, and to put the nail in the coffin of our relationship, so I could just move the F on. That was actually the turning point of the evening. He told me that it didn't line up with who he knew me to be, which was a good, honest, faithful person. He said that I must have felt really backed into a corner to turn to infidelity, and that actually made him sit down and examine how he had been acting for the past 10 years. As for how he had been acting, he was a workaholic who had literally zero time for family life, including fun interesting conversations about non-work related things. He never came with me to visit my family, hardly spent time with our son, expected me to do everything around the house, which I didn't really mind, except he would complain terribly when it wasn't up to his standards instead of just fixing things to his liking without complaining. For example, he would complain to me about a sock being on the floor rather than just picking it up as he walked by. He didn't listen to anything I said, and I had a running joke where if I wanted to end a conversation, all I had to do was talk longer than 30 seconds, because at that point he became very dismissive and would literally walk away. He would threaten me with divorce every time we had a fight. I eventually asked him to stop and he more or less did, but occasionally lapsed. His mother lived with us for years and she was incredibly emotionally abusive in ways that I cannot and will not ever forgive. but whenever I brought it up with my husband, he got very defensive, defended her, and said that I was wrong for feeling the way I did. Most hurtful was the fact that he didn't work for a year by choice, and despite all of his free time, he did not spend a single day hanging out with me and our son. That was when I was convinced he didn't love me, and that's when I met the other guy, which spearheaded all of this. After that initial big conversation, we did a lot of soul searching. I went on a trip planned long in advance to visit my family. It was one of those family trips that he never took with me, so he didn't have a ticket and therefore didn't come along. During our time apart, we thought a lot about what we wanted from our marriage and each other, and whether we were willing to work on things, whether we were able to come back from the hurt we'd caused each other. We spent a lot of time texting and on the phone. On the day I was supposed to come back, we were both pacing and debating whether we actually wanted to see each other again. We decided to stay together and make it work. He has a better work-life balance and does things around the house. I speak up when things bother me. We have conversations about things that aren't work related. He values what I say. He apologized for the way his mom treated me, and for not acknowledging how hurtful it was, which made me feel like a huge load was lifted from my spirit. He said that he didn't even realize that's how he was acting all those years, that he was acting like a person he never wanted to be. I believe him. I always knew he had a good heart. I feel like his behavior now matches with who he is on the inside. I didn't know our marriage could be as good as it is now. If I had, I definitely would have tried to have that conversation years ago, preferably without the infidelity. Sorry this was so long. Thanks for listening to another episode on how to make marriages work. Hit the subscribe button for more life advice from your marriage expert team TTS. And remember, relationships are never like shown in movies. They are always a compromise and require hard work and time.